All right, welcome to our podcast. This is a special one.
This is a very special one.
Yeah. So I am John Hawkins. I run the Inside the Rings podcast with Austin Schofield, who's based in Texas, and we made the connection.
It's wild.
It's a crazy connection.
It's a crazy connection.
Right? Krista Parry with Visit Salt Lake, but that's not where we met.
No.
We met in 2001. Right before the Salt Lake Olympics happened. And so, Krista, tell us how we actually knew each other before.
I mean, this is what's so crazy that, right? We're in Paris, right? Mm-hmm. I say your name, I see you. Yeah. First thing when I get on the plane, it's like, oh, John, hey.
Yeah.
And we go, and I couldn't figure out, like, how do I know him? Okay, right. I know him. How do I know him? And it wasn't until we were leaving Paris, right? On the plane. We were
a week later.
And you said, wait a minute, what did you say that you did during the 2002 games? I said, I was on the torch relay. Like, no way. Yeah. I was in the media center in Salt Lake. Yeah. I was out on the road, and I was the road dog kind of traveling around the country, and you were here with my sister Lindsay at the media center here in Salt Lake, and you guys were basically our point people on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, we talked to each other
nearly every day.
You know,
right?
And it was crazy how we made that connection. You had said, I did some work for the Olympics in 2002, and literally I was on the ramp to get on the plane to come back to Utah, and I was like, wait, what did you do? And you're like, I did the torch relay, and I was like, that's how we know each other. But the whole time we'd been texting, we'd been talking about, I knew that you were with Visit Salt Lake, but we'd been talking about 2034. Yep. And not made that connection.
Never made that connection.
And it clicked. And
I think that it was like all those memories of like what I loved about the torture. Like I feel so grateful. Yeah. And you have to say how you got involved, because the way that I even got involved, right? I was a senior in college. I had been interning, for the Olympics for a year. I was going to school up in Logan. I would go to school from 7:30 until 11:30 in the morning, and then I'd drive down. I worked from 1 o'clock until midnight, then I would make the drive back up to Logan. I did that every day. And I think it's because I was just like so passionate about what we were doing. Yeah. And it was early September, actually, of that year. And my boss, Randy, passed away in his sleep. And it was like so traumatic. It was Randy and Albert Scholes. Albert Scholes, who's an incredible human.
Love Albert Scholes.
Albert was, and so it was Albert and Randy were in our Coltrane office here. Yeah. Randy and I would always kind of joke, because Albert was kind of old, and he had been working really hard. Right, he had done so much for this community, so much for like the church he'd gone and served, and he was like, I'm going to come back and I'm going to do this. And we always was Randy and I would always say like, hey, okay, Albert may die in the office, and so we kind of had and I remember I got a call from Albert. It was like 7 a.m. on a Saturday morning, and I'd been at a Randy was a singles ward bishop, and I'd gone to an event with him the night before, and I got a call, and that just said he passed away, and I'm like, what in the world? Wow. And it was like shattering. Yeah. And then it was kind of that like next man up, they're like, Krista, you've got to step in. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm in college. Right. No, I can't step up. Yeah. And I withdrew from college. And the crazy thing is like how it all, because this is September 9th, right? And we all know what happened on
2 days later.
2 days later. Mm-hmm. And I remember Jamie Rupert calling me on September 11th, and she said, get down to the office, get down to the Wells Fargo building. And I went down, and it was just chaos.
Probably chaos.
Yeah, because it was Mitt and Caroline were in Battery Park, New York City, because on September 12th we were actually announcing our torchbearers, and we were doing this big ceremony, and it was just like, what's going to happen, how is it going to go on? And it was such a pivotal moment for me in my life, because in that moment they said, okay, we have to find 100 torchbearers that we can now honor that have been directly impacted by 9/11. And so I spent the next 2 months literally reading magazines, because Google didn't, literally the internet didn't really exist. Like the whitepages.com existed, but I would read, I'd watch Oprah Winfrey, I would hear all these stories, and I would Google them on whitepages.com to try to find their names.
Their contact information.
And it's just like crazy that is how I got my start, right? Withdrawing from my senior year, saying like, okay, I guess I'm all in. Yeah. And you kind of did the same thing.
Yeah. So it was November of that year. And Burke Olson called me, our friend Burke Olson, who's over at Deseret Media now. And he called me and said, hey, I've got an idea that for you. And he basically said, come do an internship with the Torch Media Relations team. And I was like, I'm in.
Yeah.
The next day I was working at Maggleby's down in Provo. The next day I went in and I quit. And they're like, good luck with that. And I mean, they were supportive, but they're like, you won't have a job when you come back. And I'm like, great, okay.
Yeah.
And I interned for, the media team, and that's how I got my start in the Olympics. And that's how we met.
That's how we met.
And then as soon as the Olympics were done, we didn't talk.
No.
I mean, there wasn't Facebook.
No.
There wasn't,
Isn't
these
that
ways
crazy?
that we communicate now.
Yep.
Until Paris.
Until 2034.
Yeah.
It's like when you think
Yeah.
about the Olympic movement and how it brings people together,
Yeah.
I think that's like the coolest thing.
Absolutely.
Is that all of a sudden you have these people who are passionate about
Right.
the games and passionate about, okay, how do we help to carry that torch, quite
Yeah,
honestly?
exactly, yeah.
And here we are.
Yeah. So you were on the road.
I was on the road.
Like you were the road dog.
I was a road
the road
dog.
warrior.
Yeah.
On the road all the time. We talked on the phone probably multiple times a day. I remember 9/11. I was in my junior year at BYU in the public relations program, and 9/11 was pivotal for me because I was in the newsroom that whole day.
Yeah.
Doing different assignments, writing different, ideas for stories, and just remember like the trauma that was. And then, fast forward to February of the next year, and even December of that year, the excitement around the Olympic Games and the possibility in September, early October that we could cancel it, and then the resumption of those plans and the phenomenal job the team did with the games.
I think it was like this rallying, I think back and I had such like tender moments.
Yeah.
I was making phone calls to people, and I will always remember there was a phone call that I made to Liz Glick, and Liz, her husband Jeremy Glick, was on United Flight 93. And when I heard about the United Flight 93 and I read about it, it like gives me chills now.
Yeah, me too.
And I said, okay, we have to find all these women, Lisa, Todd Burnett's wife, Liz Glick, and I said, we have to find them, and we have to we need to have them carry this flame in honor of them. And I remember looking for a Liz Glick in New Jersey, and I went to whitepages.com and I found Jeremy and Elizabeth Glick, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to make this call. I'm in my little cubicle, at the office, and I will always remember that call, and it was in October, so it had been probably 4 weeks since 9/11.
Right.
And I called and I said, hi, is this Liz Glick, the wife of Jeremy Glick? And she was very trepidatious, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
So my name is Krista. I'm with the 2002 Salt Lake Olympics, and we want to have you carry the flame in honor of Jeremy. And it like makes me tear up now because she said, I just hear crying on the other end, and I'm crying.
Yeah.
I'm a 21-year-old, and she said, this is the first time that I've smiled since that moment. She said, Jeremy was the biggest Olympic. Like, he loved the Olympics, and he wanted to be in the Olympics. He was a jiu-jitsu type person.
Yeah.
And he had wanted to be in the Olympics, and she said, the fact that I get to carry the flame in his honor,
in his name,
this is me carrying on his legacy.
That's awesome.
And that's like the Olympic, that's I think the way that we united.
Yeah.
I think not only united our country, but I think united all of the nations.
Yeah.
That's what like the O2 Games stood for.
Yeah,
And
for
we
sure.
saw that as we went throughout the country and we were going through small towns, big cities, there were American flags everywhere. And there were just like, kids lining the streets with American flags and so much pride.
Yeah.
And I think that was exactly what we needed at that time.
Absolutely. And I think it's what the world needs now, right?
So true.
We just got out of this worldwide pandemic, and there's a lot of kind of angst and fear and mistrust of people. And that's one thing that I saw over in Paris was people want to come together. It doesn't matter what country you're from, right? You want to come together and cheer, and it doesn't matter which side you're cheering for.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I think the Olympics does really well.
Absolutely.
It's the only, I was talking to Don Sterling
Yeah.
a month or two ago, and I said, Don, the one thing about the Olympics is it's the only thing that brings people together in unity that doesn't start off with a tragedy.
That's exactly right.
Right?
Yeah.
And I mean, 9/11 brought people together, but it was tragic.
Yep.
You know, you can go back through history and talk about different events that bring people together that were tragic, you know. But the Olympics isn't that way. It's a joyous, happy, you know, celebration of life.
Yeah.
And we're watching these athletes that are pressing the bounds of human limitation, right? And you know, you think of the world records that have been broken in this last, you know, couple weeks, and then we have the Paralympics to look forward
exactly.
to. These athletes are
unbelievable.
Amazing.
Right?
They do more with less limbs than I can do with a full body.
Exactly.
Right? And
I think that's what Paris did, you know, because I do think the Olympic movement, you know, over the past few Olympics, I think that what Paris did is it united people.
Yeah.
And it was the perfect location. When I also think about the Salt Lake City getting the 2034 bid, like, could there have been a better place for that?
Right.
Because it was people united. They're not united there because they, you know, even these Olympians who won, I loved seeing Scotty Scheffler. You know, who didn't make much money, right? Like, obviously, it wasn't about the money.
It's not about the money.
It was that
right.
he won the gold medal for his country.
For his country.
And that's what the Olympics is about, right?
Yeah.
It's about that spirit. It's about the athletes and how hard they work.
And Brittany Griner,
oh my gosh,
her reaction to getting the gold medal. I mean, we all know her story in Russia, and just her reaction and appreciation for her country. Same type of thing, you know. It just gives you chills that these athletes are world-class athletes, but they just want to do it for their country.
Yes.
You know?
And that's what I think is so powerful about the Olympics. Like I always say, I've always obviously been a huge Olympic fan, you know, since just like you, right? Like, love the Olympics, always wanted to be an Olympian, you know, quickly realized that my talent still wasn't there.
Me too.
I was never going to run a 48-second 400 meter.
Right.
You know, like, okay, that's not going to be in my cards.
I ran the 400 meters once in high school, and I was like, I'll never do that again.
Oh my gosh.
It was so hard.
So hard, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, they are putting hard work and effort. And when you think about those Olympians who went, you know, who came with us to Paris, and you think, man, these are athletes. I mean, they get paid hardly any money, right? They don't get paid a lot of money, but they do it because they want to do it for the love of their country.
Yeah.
And I think that's what our world needs so much. It was what our world needed in 2002.
Right.
And I think about that momentum now that we can build to 2034 and beyond. It's going to be so unifying.
You know, being at the games and seeing such an international diversity there, and talking with some people, you know, in broken English or in, you know, Google Translate, right? I remember, you know, one gentleman from Ukraine was there at the opening ceremonies, and when Ukraine their ship sailed by, it was a pretty tender moment. You know, the audience, you know, there were Slovakians and Mexicans and Brazilians and Ukrainians and Americans all in the same location, and probably more, but people kind of went silent for a second and then started to applaud, like in unison, you know. And so I was talking to him and just said, you know, we're thinking about you, we're praying for your country, and he's like, you know, we appreciate that so much. And he brings out a photo of him with his bazooka that he just fought, you know. And you know, one of the things that I love about the Olympic movement is they call for a worldwide truce for peace during the Olympic movement or the Olympic Games, and that's what it was founded on. You know, and reading about Pierre de Coubertin, his idea was education, athletics, and peace. And I think that's what we saw in Paris was those three kind of pillars of the Olympic movement coming together. And it creates that strong unity and spirit throughout the world.
It really does. I mean, I think that's what's so remarkable about it is I think sport is such a unifying, right? Just the first thing is that sport. Everybody can root for sport, right? It doesn't matter because we can all appreciate sport and the hard work that goes into that. And then you bring in these like nations. I mean, I'd never felt so loved, you know, by people, even if you couldn't communicate with them. It was like the language of sport. Truly is what I felt like it was. It's like the language of sport. Like, hey, we all are here appreciating this hard work, this effort. Like that sport is bringing us together. And that's what embodies, the Olympic movement. And I think that's why it's so exciting when people say that, there's all these debates about like, are they worth it? And I say to everybody, I'm like, listen, there is, first of all, we're in a very good place because Salt Lake, in Utah, in any place, like we have kept up all of our facilities.
Absolutely.
And so when you look at like where the money is going, no, it's only going to be to enhance, right? And to help the infrastructure and to help all those things that make our state even better. Right. But really it's to bring the world here again, right? To have the opportunity to bring the world here and for us to be able to celebrate the world together, there's nothing like it.
In such a beautiful celebration of humanity and achievement. There is nothing like it.
Well, that's what I loved. Like every single, I mean, I was like glued to the games, right?
Yeah,
watching,
me too.
right? Like, you're no sleep, right? No work.
Right.
It's like glued to the games.
Yeah.
And you just see it. It didn't matter who won, right? I mean, you're just crying because you think about that moment, that joy. I like capturing that joy of people at the finish line.
Yeah.
And you're like, man, you hope everybody in the world gets to have that joy. And I think that there was joy not only in the competitor, but it was in the nation, right? Like we as a nation got to feel it. Like when we had the USA and they would, when you think about all the people who were the underdogs and that they won, you're like, oh my gosh, we're so excited, jumping up and down.
Like the sprinter from St. Lucia.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh.
Wasn't that amazing?
That was amazing.
Yeah.
She's a national hero.
And to think that she was, you're like, man, she's the first athlete out of St. Lucia and what that does for that nation.
Yeah, to ever win a medal.
Isn't that
Not
crazy?
a gold medal,
Yeah,
a medal.
a medal.
Right? And then she follows that up with a medal in the 200 as well. And it's like, what a great thing for that nation.
Yeah.
And we saw them just exuberant celebration for her.
Yeah. I cried. I have 2 teenage boys who are like, Mom, why are you crying? I'm like, think about how proud, think about how much hard work she has put into that.
Right.
She has put so much work into that. Every single one of these athletes have given their lives, right? They have discipline. They've had to probably given up a lot of things. They've had to sacrifice so much. And here they are in that moment. Whether you've taken first or whether you've taken, 15th. One of my friends, Whitney Morgan, who took 5th. I was at the Olympic trials in Eugene. She took 5th. She thought like, okay, this is my comeback, right? I just had surgery in the fall. This is my comeback. And then for her to get that call to say, actually, you get to come. And then for her to make that finals, right? You're like, that was a celebratory moment for all of these athletes and all the hard work that they do.
I mean, you mentioned it, the discipline that they have, waking up early in the morning. In talking with some of the athletes that went over, the young athletes that went over, they get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, they travel, their parents are sacrificing everything to help them fulfill their dream. And then, to study, then go back to work out, go to bed and repeat that whole process over again. I mean, the discipline and the sacrifice that they have is, there's not very many people that can do that.
No.
Right. Or that will do that.
Yeah.
Right. So
that's
one of the things that I like about what, was introduced at the bid presentation in France is these families sacrifice so much. And then they get basically a month to 2 weeks notice that their child, their loved one is going to the games. By then, it's ticket prices, planes, hotels are gone. So what I love about the bid is that we're the first to say we're going to create a family village too, and give tickets at a very reasonable price to these families of these athletes so that they can come and enjoy that time with their
who have sacrificed so much and they should be there.
Absolutely.
That is exactly where they should be to be able to be in that moment.
Absolutely. So so what's this?
Well, okay, so I brought my Olympic torch because what I love about the theme of 2002 was Light the Fire Within. And when you think about how that captures, the just how that united the world.
Absolutely.
You're like, so this is my torch that I carried. I will always remember it because you would basically get a call. They would call you the night before and say, Krista, we have a slot for you. I was a 6 a.m. slot in Fall River, Massachusetts.
Okay.
It was frigid cold. And I was literally probably one of the first. And so there was not a soul on the street, right? It was just me. And for those 0.2, it's like 0.2 miles.
Right.
I was like, oh, I am carrying the Olympic torch. This is like the Olympic flame. Like I am the only one who's carrying the Olympic flame
at this moment. Yeah.
And that's what I love about the torch relay is that I think the torch relay is a way for us to take that spirit and to unify that Olympic spirit throughout the country. That everybody gets to be a part of that.
Yeah.
And so I brought my torch.
That's awesome.
For you to hold. Did you carry the torch?
I didn't carry it, but I actually have a torch. It's in my office
you
up
do?
at the Capitol.
Okay. Yeah.
And I brought it out. I ran a resolution on February 9th of 2022.
Yeah.
And celebrating the 20th anniversary of the 2002 games. And I brought my torch, and I had my torch relay jacket.
It.
And it was awesome. Others, the thing about the torch is it never goes out of style.
Yeah.
People are always wanting to see it, hold it, and because it's part of a moment in time that has united people and gives hope, right? That's one thing I love about the slogan from 2002, light the fire within. It's a hopeful message, and it brings the world together, and like we've talked about. So I do have a torch. It was lit at one point. I don't know who carried it, but it's.
Well, that was the thing of like that hope, because the whole thing with the O2 games is that you had to be nominated, right? So is that you couldn't nominate yourself.
Right.
You had to nominate somebody else who had inspired you.
Yeah.
And I loved seeing that throughout the country, right? All of these. I remember I was kind of in a rough spot in my life at that time, and I had a really low self. Like I was just in a hard place, and I remember being out on the relay. And it kind of changed my life, because you see these people carrying this flame, and they had no limbs, right? We had people who had no limbs.
Yeah.
We had people who had tragic circumstances. We saw people from 9/11, right? We saw all of that. And the hope that they had when they were carrying this torch, it just like filled them. And I think that if you talk to every single, anytime that you talk to somebody who's like, oh, I carried that torch, it's like, it just changed their lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
And hope is like such a thing that I think our whole world needs.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's one of the seminal points in their lives, right? That they'll talk about forever, and the memento that they have, they'll pass down for generations. What do you? So you're with Visit Salt Lake.
Yeah.
What do you anticipate some of the changes being? In leading up, or not changes, maybe enhancements is the better word, but leading up to 2034 that will happen in Salt Lake City.
I think what's so cool is when you just look at how Salt Lake is changing. I remember when they brought the IOC out here. They're out here for a visit in April. And, we had some discussions with the president, and I asked them, I said, how has Salt Lake changed? What was Salt Lake? And they said, it is like a different place. When you think about where Salt Lake has come over the last 22 years, and just the urban people moving here, all of that, they're like, you can feel it. And when you think about the next 10 years, I think what's so cool is that Salt Lake, I love Salt Lake. I'm originally from Denver, right? I grew up in Denver, came out here to run the 400 meter. So I was a 400 meter runner, came out to the University of Utah, and I remember when I first came here, I was like, okay, Salt Lake reminds me a lot of Denver. It's a smaller city, Denver. And now I think there's not a better place in the world like Salt Lake in Utah from just a community standpoint. I think this whole notion that I think that the embodiment in our community is that like we're better together, right? Like we work together. And I think that's very unique, and I think that as we think about all of the people who are going to have to work together to be able to pull off another most successful games, 2002 went down as some of the most successful games, and that's going to be the same thing for 2034. I think that we have that pathway of like, what are the things that we need to do? I think it's great that we have 10 years to say, what can we do now? And how do we build that over time? And how do we all work together, to be able to build that up? I mean, Salt Lake has been on fire anyway, when I say like, not physically, obviously, it has been on fire too. Actually that has happened too. But when you just think like from a Visit Salt Lake standpoint, like our job is to literally bring in visitors, right? Because they bring so much economic impact to this community, and we are solely responsible for all the big conventions and meetings, and they're the ones who are making such a huge, $5.6 billion in economic impact a year.
It's amazing.
And we are having conversations, 5 years ago, people were like, well, maybe Salt Lake, maybe not.
Yeah.
But now we are like, people want to come here. They want to bring their people here.
Yeah.
And I always say, like, there's a saying that tourism is the front door to economic development.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? It really is. We bring people here to visit.
Yeah.
The greatest thing is that they leave their money, they go home. We don't have to educate them, right? We don't have to do all those things that we're always trying to find money to do.
Right.
Like, no, they come here and they bring their dollars and they leave that, and then we get to and use that to build infrastructure and all these things that make Salt Lake so great.
Yeah.
And I think we're only going to see that even more. How do we really capitalize on the next 10 years?
Yeah.
And then how do we capitalize on that even in the future?
Yeah, and that's the thing, is it will have a long-lasting effect, right? And I was on a panel discussion back in April or May with the American Hotel and Lodging Lodging Association, and I actually asked the audience a question, and turned it on them a little bit and just said, how long did the economic impact last after the games in 2002? And I heard someone shout, it hasn't stopped.
It hasn't stopped.
This is 22 years later. And then everybody else is, not everybody, but a lot of people are like, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
We haven't seen it stop. And, you get detractors from obviously the games and the growth and all that stuff, but it does make our community better.
It does.
And it does help with bringing us together.
Absolutely.
And that's what we need, right?
Absolutely.
Right now, so.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think that the economic impact has never stopped, and I think it's only going to grow as we think about, like, who do we want Salt Lake to become, right? Who is Salt Lake now, and how can it become better? There are always those people who are like, well, it doesn't need to change, but change is inevitable, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
It's going to change for the good and the bad, and we've actually seen cities that have changed for the bad, right? But I think that what we have with Salt Lake is that it's only going to continue to change for the better, and it's going to be a better place to live, right? It's going to be a better place for all of us to work, and that's why we live here.
Right. So how many people have asked you, how can I get involved with the games?
Right? Do you always? It's
every day.
Every day. And the greatest thing is that we're going to need everybody. Right? I always say, I'm like, no, this is a huge, massive undertaking.
Absolutely.
Right? It's like, I think Fraser says like 50 Super Bowls, in one event.
Right.
This takes the community, right? This takes all of us. And whether it's a job, whether it's a volunteer opportunity, there's going to be so much opportunity. I would say to people, like, get involved. Because when you're involved, you get to be a part of something that is a part of history, and you'll have those memories that you will take forever.
There's one gentleman, and I don't even know his name, but Kat, Rainey Norman, and Colin Hilton talk about him a lot. He volunteered leading up to the games to be the bobsled announcer.
Wow.
And now he goes all over the world to announce bobsled.
That is
events.
so cool.
And just from a volunteer position, right? And I think that's what we see is, people getting involved. And Utah's a pretty unique place that way, in that people want to be involved. They want to volunteer their time and their energy because they love the opportunity that it gives them to just have new experiences, right? And so, it's pretty amazing, even now, 22 years later, especially in the winter, to go down the street and see green and purple and red, and not so many red, but yellow jackets that were jackets during the Olympics.
That people are so proud of.
Yes.
I actually had somebody ask me yesterday, Krista, how do I get one of those jackets? I said, get involved.
Yeah.
How do you get one of those jackets? Hey, you volunteer.
Yeah.
If you don't have a work, you volunteer, and that's how you do that. And we're going to need everybody to be a part of that, because that is what makes us. We have this mission at Visit Salt Lake to become the most hospitable community in the world.
Oh, cool.
And I believe we're going to do that.
Yeah.
Because I think that there's just nothing like.
I'm surprised we're not already.
I know we should be, but we're on a mission to get that name. Condé Nast actually has these rankings.
Okay.
And that's our goal, is
That's
that we
awesome.
need to become the most hospitable place in the world.
Yeah.
And that is because we have the most hospitable people here.
We do.
When you think about Utah and how friendly it is, that's actually something that's unique.
Yeah.
I really do think that's a differentiator here.
Yeah.
Is that people are friendly and they want to help out. And how do we grow that?
That's what Carl Stoss said when he came in April is, he's like, look, you have great facilities, you've got great infrastructure, you know how to put on the games, obviously, but there's one story you don't tell very well, and that's your people.
That's right.
And how welcoming they are, and how, they love people from other places and other countries. And, I think that's a big part of our culture, right? Where we send our youth out to the world to gain experience as LDS or other types of missionaries or Peace Corps or whatever. But it's part of the fabric of our community that we're a worldwide welcoming location, right? So I love that idea.
It is. I mean, it is truly a differentiator. I think that is something that we should truly hang our hat on and say,
for sure.
Okay, we need to own this. And because people experience in it and we just don't tout it because I think it's so innate to us, that we're just like, no, that's just the way that we are.
Yeah.
But then you go other places, you're like, oh, they're not like this everywhere.
Right.
And Utah is so friendly.
It's so friendly. Yeah.
I think we'll make that happen.
Good.
Yeah.
How do you know? What can we help you with there?
I know, right? Well, we're actually coming up with a training. So
cool.
we teed this off. So with the NBA All-Star Game that we had last year, we used an app called Fabric App, and it was a way for us to gamify the experience. So we're actually going to do a training. We're developing a frontline staff training because the hospitality industry, just in Salt Lake County alone, employs 44,000 people.
Oh my gosh!
And so how do we actually give?
That big.
Yeah, isn't that great? So employs 44,000 people. I think that the games will employ 42,000. That's one person for 1 year, and we think, how do we help them? Because I think it has to start with them feeling like they're part of it.
Yeah.
How do we give them access? How do we help to give them access to all these places? Because I think people can work as a server, as a housekeeper, as all these things, and yet they've actually never experienced Salt Lake. So our goal is how can we give them access to go and experience all that Salt Lake has to offer? And then how can we bring all these ambassadors that we have together and say, this is what Salt Lake's about? So we're working on that, and I think we'll be rolling that out to the community of like, hey, here are just some trainings, and here's how you can go experience this for yourself too.
I love that idea. Yeah. We're in a very different position now than we were then. I remember I read Governor Leavitt's book about the Olympics and his experience in trying to engage business leaders, tech leaders to come to Utah and see what we were all about. We don't really have that issue anymore, right? We're known as a tech hub and have lots of really good tech jobs, but people love to come to Utah. We see tourists up on Capitol Hill. In fact, this morning there was a busload from Asia that were walking around the Capitol and seeing what we have in our state to offer, and it's pretty amazing. We don't have the problem of not being known anymore.
That's right. I think that, I think the Olympics, though, 2 games helped put us on the map. Obviously it started in 1869 with the Golden Spike, right? This was literally where we united the world. Like I always say to them, like, no, we've been welcoming the world since 1869 when the Golden Spike, when we united those 2 things. It just is a part of the fabric of who we are. Yeah. And then when you think about, like, okay, how do all these people come here, and what are those things that we can do to help others feel a part of that?
Yeah. It's pretty amazing. So, well, you're starting a podcast soon.
I'm starting a podcast, and it's going to be all about kind of carry the flame.
Awesome.
And really leaning into that torchbearer experience and how does that kind of change people's lives? What is that moment that was because again, when you think about carrying that flame for even 0.2, it was like 0.2 of a mile. It's not even it's not a whole lap. It's not even a 400 meter, know? And you're like, man, but you're the only one in the world at that time that gets to do that.
Yeah, and you get to pass that on to someone else who it becomes that person.
And I think that is, I always take that, there's a song that I always sing to my boys, and it's this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine.
Oh, yeah.
Because I truly think, and I think that's what the Olympic experience gave me, is that oftentimes, sometimes our light is a little bit dim, and we just need to borrow a light from somebody else.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what, as you saw people kind of passing the torch, it's like, hey, we're lighting this from one person. We can do that metaphorically too, right? We can do that in our everyday lives.
Yep.
We don't have to be carrying a torch.
I love
we
that
can just
idea.
let our light shine, and if our light feels a little bit dim, how can we borrow that light from somebody else?
Yeah. That was one thing that I noticed myself getting, like, my heart sank when they blew out the flame in Paris.
Right.
I was like, oh, it's over.
Yeah.
And obviously it'll be back again, but that flame is so, like, hopeful and to coin a pun, it's enlightening. Right?
It is.
So that's a great great metaphor.
So you can sing that song
for sure.
all day long. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. And just think about when our own light is dim, how can we borrow a light from somebody else?
So okay.
Well, awesome. Well, thanks so much. It's so fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know. So great to chat with you.
Absolutely. And it's fun to remake that connection. And
it's such a small, I could not believe that.
Yeah.
And I think that had you have known that my maiden name was Rolls,
yeah.
right? And you knew like Lindsay Rolls.
Yeah.
I know. Such a small world.
Yeah.
So many things we can do. I'm so excited of
right.
what are all the opportunities that we have over next.
We've got 10 years,
10 years
to do it.
Yep.
And even after that, right?
Yep.
We can make a big impact on the world with these games. So awesome. Krista, thanks so much.
Thanks, John.
Yeah.
So fun.
Appreciate it.
Okay.
So that was fun to have Krista on. Hey, if you like the podcast, give us a like, give us a recommendation, give us some feedback. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Love to hear what our audience is interested in. And then share with your friends and family on your social media networks. We'd love to get more listeners involved in this podcast. So thanks again, and have a great day.